Sorry, we're a little late starting. We were all chatting here in the center. We forgot. Yeah, so welcome back, everyone. Um, yeah. Well, one of the, have to remember this kind of course, Introduction to Meditation, Meditation 101. The point, of course, is that so you feel confident and comfortable meditating on your own at home. Um, So I want to make sure that you go away with that. And well, yeah, almost halfway through the course. So, yeah, again, what we've covered so far is sitting in the correct posture. And then, um, yeah, and then together with that, some of the other things about setting the environment that you meditate in. One thing I didn't mention is it's good to clean the place wherever the space where you meditate, it should be kind of neat and clean, right? Um, and there's two reasons for that. One reason is because the external environment that we're in affects our mind, right? So if we're sitting in a space that's kind of like there's kind of dusty and sort of things are not organized, they're kind of just, I don't know, they're like, I don't know, things that there's no need for them to be there. They've been sitting there a long time, and it's kind of just disheveled, sort of. Then it makes our mind feel kind of like that. Our mind feel kind of not clean and sort of disorganized and yeah, has a kind of effect on our mind. So, and then the other reason that with the space we're meditating in, it should be kind of neat and clean, is because especially if we engage in more like the faith aspects of Buddhist practice or any religious practice that might appeal to us, then we invoke the kind of the beings, invoke like the enlightened beings that we have faith in to come and be present in that space, and we imagine them being in that space. So it's just like if you were to invite like a respected guest to your home, you would clean it up first and make everything kind of yeah, neat and clean. Then like that, if you're invoking kind of the presence of kind of supreme beings to your space, then you want the space out of respect. You want the space to be kind of neat and clean. But especially the first one, it has an effect on our mind. So, yeah, the space where we meditate, again, it should be someplace we're comfortable with. We should sit, and it's good to sit in the same place, meditate every day. And then should be neat and clean. And if you set up images that are inspiring to you, it could be of your family or your teachers or whatever, images that are inspiring. And then it's good to put out offerings, like flowers or some water or food, make offerings. And if we like, burn some incense. Yeah. And then sit in the same place day after day so that because every time we sit in a new place to meditate, we tend to like want to look around and become familiar with that place, right? Which is a bit of a distraction. So if you sit in the same place every day, then it's not your attention's not as easily distracted outwards to looking at things in the environment. And then also, meditation practice should be something, it just to make it, because it's something we need to do regularly, right? So it makes it much easier if every time we don't have to think about, oh, where am I going to sit today? How am I going to arrange that space? It should just be routine, something that we just do on the same place, kind of the same basic way every day. Although we might do slightly different meditations or slightly different topics to meditate on. Um, yeah, so there's all that kind of advice around like, setting up your meditation practice. And then, meditation is something, it's just like physical exercise. Like with exercise, if you just exercise like once a week or something, it's not going to be especially beneficial. It's something you need to do kind of regularly. Um, yeah, and even if you do, exercise, even if you just do like 10 minutes a day for like 4 or 5 times a week, that's much better than doing like 1 hour one time a week, something. So it's something you want to do kind of consistently. And then, it doesn't have to be every day, but ideally, yes, every day. But even if it's just, 4 or 5 times a week, then you'll see progress, right? And the same with meditation. If you do 4 or 5 times a week, then it's easier, It gets easier and easier and easier. You get better at it, and you see kind of progress. So, yeah. In terms of like meditation, though, what does progress look like? Um, Basically, I mean, from the traditional perspective, like, well, um, one way we see progress in terms of, I mean, we can kind of think in terms of what are the two main kinds of meditation we discussed, remember? If you divide meditation into two different types, there's placement meditation, where you're mainly focusing on one object. You're placing your attention on one object. And then there's analytical meditation, where you're thinking about or doing something more dynamic in relation to the meditation object. Right. So in placement meditation, it's quite easy to define the object. It's like you're watching your breath or watching your mind or visualizing, like an image and focusing your attention on that. It's quite straightforward. In analytical meditation, because there's many different types of meditation, it's a bit more difficult to define like what the object is. But in some cases, it's easier, like with loving kindness, meditation or metta. You're trying to generate this attitude of loving kindness. So everything you're thinking about that's related to that is part of the meditation. If you're thinking about something totally unconnected to that, then it's a distraction, right? It's not part of that meditation. And it's distracting your attention, your energy away from doing that. But there could be you know, like a more broad topic, like thinking about, say, what is anger, and the what is anger, and what are the drawbacks of anger, the mind of anger? How does it disturb me? How does it cause problems in my life? So then, yeah, the way of defining that then is just anything you're thinking about that's related to that, whether quite directly connected or indirectly connected, is all part of that meditation. But again, if you're thinking about something totally different and disconnected, then it's not part of that. So, yeah. So, and whenever we meditate, though, it's important to, yeah, have the good environment, a supportive environment, which is also a comfortable place to sit, and then sit in the correct posture, whatever posture we find, most comfortable to sit in. Then generate a positive motivation, and then do the main part of the meditation session. And so, as part of the main part of this meditation session, to set parameters in terms of what am I going to focus on, and for how long am I going to meditate. And then at the end, we dedicate. So those are the four main parts of a meditation session, right? Posture, motivation, the main part of the session, and then dedication at the end. Yeah, so then this question, well, what is progress in terms of meditation? What does progress look like? So if we think in terms of the two kinds of meditation, placement meditation, analytical meditation, in terms of placement meditation, progress in meditation looks like our ability to concentrate on one object becomes better and better and better, right? We can have a good quality of awareness of the object for a longer time, and also the quality of our awareness becomes better, right? So in terms of the length of time, that's quite easy to see, right? At first, maybe we can only stay somewhat focused for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Then after a month or 2 months, maybe we can have that same quality of focus for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And so we can stay more focused for a long period of time. So how do we know we're being more focused, right? Basically, at first, when we meditate, it's like, how often does our attention wander off to something else? How often do we become distracted to the degree that we're not aware of that object anymore? So say the object of meditation is the breath. Then at first, when we're meditating on the breath, it might be, every 2 seconds or so, every 3 seconds, we find we're not aware of that anymore. We're thinking about something else, which is quite normal. And actually, when we're new to meditation, it's very common that we feel like we're more distracted than we were before we meditated, right? But it's not that we're really, meditation, just focusing on breath is not going to make you more distracted. Like, how would that make you more distracted? But rather, it's that we become more aware of how much our mind jumps around, like all the time. Ordinarily, we're not very aware of it because we're not trying to do the opposite. We're not trying to keep our mind on one object, so we don't notice how much our mind's jumping around. Yeah, It's like maybe you could have a dog that's, if you live out in the countryside with a big like fenced in yard and the dog can just run wherever it wants, run around, then you might not feel like the dog is, very, I don't know, that active. But then you move into the city and or you take it on a walk on a leash and you're trying to hold the dog on a leash and it's pulling to get off all the time. Then you realize like how active the dog is, right? So our mind's a bit like that. Like if we're not really trying to keep it focused on something, we don't notice how much it's jumping around. But as soon as we start trying to keep it focused on one object, then it becomes more clear like how many different things we're thinking about like all the time. And so it can feel like you're actually becoming more distracted, where it's actually you're just noticing more what's going on with your own mind. Um, so yeah, so the becoming better at meditation in terms of um, the quality of attention is on the one hand duration, but even more significantly is we're looking at how often our mind jumps off the object, right? So at the beginning, when we're starting to meditate, we'd probably spend more time being distracted than we do spend on the object. Like if we're watching the breath, it could well be in say 20 minutes of meditation, we spend, like 12 or 15 minutes, we're thinking about something else and we're not aware of the breath. And when we keep bringing our mind back to the breath, and only for 5 minutes we're really aware of the breath. But so gradually that should change, right? And we're able to maintain a continued awareness of the breath for a little bit longer, maybe from 2 seconds to 3 seconds or 4 seconds. And the instances of totally losing awareness of the breath become less and less and less till, till we're like 50% of the time on the object and 50% distracted. No. And then, gradually like 2/3 of the time on the object and then 1/3 of the time distracted. So we should see that kind of change where we can spend more and more time on the object, and it takes less effort to keep our attention there. Also, the effort that it takes to be focused should become less and less and less. And again, the physical exercise is a good analogy for that. Just like, if we go to the gym at first and it's really difficult to lift a 10-pound weight, but we keep going, 4 or 5 times a week, then it becomes easier and easier. And then you can lift a 15-pound weight, and then you can lift a 20-pound weight, and and then the 10-pound weight is very easy, right? So it's like our mind is kind of like a muscle in that way, is that the more we use it in a particular way, the easier whatever we're doing with it becomes. Yeah, and so meditation's no exception to that. So that's more like progress in terms of placement meditation, is that, yeah, we see essentially our focus becomes better. And then, what are the benefits of that? Well, one benefit of that is that we find by deliberately, in meditation session, so it's good, like I mentioned, I think, was it yesterday? The best time to meditate is in the morning. But then, if we can also meditate in the middle of the day and in the afternoon, in the evening. It's good to do, if you can, do 2 meditation sessions a day, like one in the morning when you first get up and one at the end of the day to kind of review, what happened during that day. And then also just, kind of center yourself, especially if, it depends what kind of job you have. But if you go to a workplace or have to go out and do a lot of things out during the day where you feel like your attention becomes very scattered or it could be kind of disturbing, then it helps a lot when you come back home, rest a while, maybe take a shower, and then to kind of get your mental focus and your sense of centeredness and groundedness back to do a little meditation session, either when you come home or at the end of the day before you go to bed. And especially if there's anything kind of emotionally troubling that happened during that day, to kind of not leave that sitting in your mind, to kind of address that, for yourself in different ways and kind of clear everything up that might be disturbing your mind. Then you can also sleep better, and then you wake up more refreshed in the morning and just improves things. Um, yeah. So, so progress in terms of placement meditation means basically generating better concentration, right? So what does progress look like in terms of analytical meditation? Like progress in meditation looks like basically, because analytical meditation, we can, it's it's like, well, we can think, I mean, we think about different issues, right? So of course there are, you know, which in this course we won't discuss much, but there's a set of like topics for contemplation that sort of review. It's called the Lam Rim. Means Lam Rim is a Tibetan term. Lam means path, and Rim means like a gradual path. So in English, it's usually translated as a graduated path to enlightenment. And basically, it's like the kind of all the main topics that the Buddha taught about, organized in a path of contemplation for one person. So this is something kind of among the different Buddhist traditions, like in the Theravada tradition, Chinese tradition, and Tibetan tradition. It's kind of unique to the Tibetan tradition because one of the last great Indian Buddhist masters to teach in Tibet, he wrote the first text organizing, you know, the Buddhist teachings in this way as a path of contemplation for one person. And then his Tibetan students and later generations of Tibetan Buddhist masters, they elaborated on that, and it's become a whole genre of texts and teachings, which is very useful. So usually in the Tibetan tradition, when we meditate regularly, if we ask, well, what do you meditate on? It's these topics of contemplation. For example, how fortunate we are to have taken rebirth as a human, and all the, you know, the amazing opportunities that this life as a human being, having met the Buddhist teachings, affords us. And then how that life won't last forever. How, you know, every moment, every day, we're coming closer to death. Eventually, we'll die, and then preparing for, you know, for that and everything. And then kind of reminding ourselves to take the essence, do whatever's most meaningful to us now before the opportunity ends, right? Because also, when we die is not certain at all. So to, you know, sort of try to take the essence of this life now while we have the opportunity before it ends. And then think about what happens after death. What are the possible rebirths that we could sort of take after death? And how do we avoid those that would be worse and create the causes for those that would be better? And then the way to do that is karma. Thinking about karma, the law of cause and effect, and how we can, you know, with understanding how karma works, how we can create causes for our own future happiness and reduce causes for our future suffering. And then on and on and on. Then on to like, yeah, renunciation for samsara, and then compassion for others, thinking about our interconnectedness with others and generating more loving kindness, compassion, and concern for others. And then, reminding ourselves to use our lives to not harm others and rather benefit others as much as we can, and so forth and so on. So there's a whole set of topics. So typically we meditate on, say, one of those topics for a week or a month, and then the next topic and the next topic. Although every day you kind of do a scanning meditation on all of those topics. But then what's really important in relation to analytical meditation is that, you know, we need to be aware of what is causing the most mental disturbance, like in our life, or the most emotional turmoil at any time in our life, right? And then address that, you know, use our meditation as like a therapy session for ourselves, you know, kind of giving therapy, becoming our own therapist. And what that means is, like, you know, if we find we're having a problem with anger or with jealousy or with low self-esteem, whatever, to be aware of, you know, what kind of you know, thoughts and emotions are causing me the most trouble, right? Or causing me the most suffering at any point in my life. And then use our meditation session to deal with that, to work with that. And of course, part of that is like reading also, you know, because we don't just know everything ourselves. So it helps to read books of advice from, you know, Shakyamuni Buddha, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and others. And then, or, you know, other spiritual traditions as well. I mean, one thing about meditation I didn't mention is, well, I started off by saying it's a secular activity, right? Meditation is not something unique to Buddhism or any particular religion. But, you know, Buddhism has a lot of detailed and very clear explanations about meditation. But you can take those and apply them to any religious tradition, or just, you know, use it in a secular way, right? Um, mm. So in terms of, you know, what we meditate on every day, it's important to be aware of, you know, and that's part of beginning a meditation session, is getting is comfortable in the posture, and then generating a positive motivation, but then also just kind of checking in with ourselves, like what's my state of mind, what's arising for me right now in this moment or this time in my life. And then if we see there's something in particular that's kind of troubling us or is weighing on our mind, to use the space of a meditation session to address that and to work with that. So here again, when like what meditation looks like, I mean, what does progress look like in terms of analytical meditation is basically we become more skillful in dealing with, on the one hand, we become more skillful in being aware of things that are troubling us in our mind, and more skillful at like being able to address those. I mean, think about those in different ways and try to find ways to reduce those disturbing emotions and disturbing thoughts. And there's many different techniques. That's one of the most excellent things about the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is there's many, many, many different types of meditation techniques to deal with kind of any issue, any problem. And so if we're meditating and doing analytical meditation correctly, then whatever kind of emotions or thoughts we see are troubling us, we should see a gradual decrease in those. Decrease in terms of frequency, like they shouldn't arise as often. When they do arise, they shouldn't arise as strongly. Like say anger. No, if we find we easily get irritated with people at work or in our family, and then we recognize there's a problem, and then we meditate on anger, understanding our own anger better, and then applying the antidotes. How can we reduce, getting angry? Then we should see that we don't get angry as easily. We're not as easily triggered. We get angry with less frequency. When we do get angry, it's not as intense as it was before, and then we recover from it more quickly, right? Then when we do get angry, then we can get over it and kind of forgive ourselves more quickly and just kind of leave it. It doesn't remain in our mind like so long and bother us for so long. Yeah, so we should see all that kind of reduction in other afflictive emotions as well. And we become more skillful in applying antidotes to disturbing emotions, and also gradually in putting effort into increasing positive emotions like patience and tolerance and gratitude. As we put effort into increasing positive emotions, we should see they arise more often. They arise more spontaneously without so much effort. When they do arise, we feel them more strongly, and they last longer, right? And they have kind of more pervasive effect on our mind. So yeah, we should see, basically, if we're doing meditation well, combining analytical meditation and placement meditation, we should see we have better mental focus. We're more aware of what's going on within ourselves. We can have a more objective kind of take a more neutral and objective perspective on what's happening in our own minds. So we're not totally so much the whim of our own habitual like tendencies to react to things in certain ways. And then we're more aware of other people. You'll notice as you become more aware of yourself and your own mind, you become more aware of like what's going on with other people around you and what's happening in their minds as you interact with them. And then you become more aware of like what are destructive thought and emotional patterns that I have, and how can and then you become more skillful at reducing those, and more aware of more conscientious about how can I increase positive thoughts and emotional like patterns, and you see those increase, right? Yeah. So those are some of the kind of what we're aiming for in terms of meditation. So yeah, I don't know. So far, from what we've learned so far, you feel like quite confident you could use that kind of at home. And if you don't, then yeah, please let me know where I can help you fill in the picture, right? Or give you more confidence. Yes.
Between analysis and chatter.
Mm. Yeah. So when you're doing analytical meditation, how do you draw the line between analysis and mental chatter, right? Again, it comes back to, that's why it's important at the beginning of the session to kind of define the object for yourself. So even in analytical meditation, you decide like, well, this is what I want to think about, like for this session. So I don't know, do you have any example in mind, like something you think you might do analytical meditation on?
I tend to be more analytical in general, so then that kind of leads me down a path where I, I lose focus.
Just focus. Yeah. But what, like, what's an example where you would lose focus?
Um, I guess I think, okay, if I'm doing sort of a loving kindness meditation, and then am I thinking, oh, have I done this wrong? Or do I need to include these people and those? Or I mean, they're just like, it brings up question after question after question.
Yeah.
Instead of just sort of being with that, it gets into the weeds.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like in loving, like take loving kindness meditation as an example. The main objective there is to, it's not just intellectual, like thinking, oh, may I be well and happy, may they be well and happy, but it should have a feeling component. That's the main thing, is to actually have this genuine wish for first oneself and then others to be well and happy. So, but there is also an, analytical component. Sorry, we're using analytical in two different ways now. Like analytical meditation is a very broad term for a kind of, as opposed to like placement meditation, it's more dynamic. And in terms of loving kindness, it's dynamic in terms of you're generating an attitude, right? But part of doing that is like thinking about things, right? And so to the degree where like thinking about something can contribute to and reinforce the development of this genuine attitude, that's helpful, right? Because I mean, just thinking, may they be well, like thinking, say, someone about in your family, you're trying to generate more loving kindness for them, and trying to generate this attitude, may they be well, may they be happy. I mean, that's good, but it's also not very unique to them, right? So it becomes more powerful if you can think more about them, understand, have a clear idea of what would happiness be for them? What kind of happiness do they not have that would be really helpful for them to have, that specific person? And so if you think about that, it can reinforce, it adds to this, when maybe they're very lonely, when they have a friend, or maybe they're sick, may they have, physical health, or maybe the financial insecurity. May they be able to be financially secure or something. So all these different things that are specific to that person, as you think about that, it can reinforce this genuine, wishing for them to be well and happy and make it like a fuller picture. But then if you find like, well, how could they be, financially secure? Maybe they should start a business. But then what kind of business should they start? Maybe like, I don't know, the auto market is not good right now. Maybe they could do like investment. They have then it's not really helping to genuine that attitude. It's a distraction, right? So when you see that the kind of thinking you're doing is not really contributing to the main project of that meditation, then it's a distraction, right? Yeah, but it varies. That's why I say defining the object of meditation and when we're doing analytical meditation, that's a bit more difficult, right? But it's helpful just to, be as clear as we can about, well, what am I trying to achieve through this specific meditation? And then as we're meditating, what kind of thoughts are actually kind of related to that and contributing to that, and what are just becoming just something else, right? Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
So I had a question. I've since I started meditating, I can address my toxic traits and habits, right? Get more insight into what I'm doing. But then, like you said, you've started noticing it in people close to you as well, like close friends that you didn't notice before. And how do we address that? Because you still want to be kind, but it's affecting the relationship or how you perceive that person.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that's an interesting question. And then, yeah, I mean, in one way, there is kind of a difficulty that comes with being more aware and more sensitive, is that you do, yeah, even though you feel like you're gaining more control over your mind as you become more aware of what, your own toxic patterns and reducing them, but then you see the same in others and it stands out more, right? And it can be disturbing. But I think that's where it really, I mean, there's no antidote like compassion for that. You really have to just be compassionate, right, for others. And I mean, on the one hand, be aware of one's own good fortune, that you've developed in a way that you can see this kind of toxic pattern more clearly in yourself. And then, yeah, one challenge of that is that then you can also see that pattern more clearly in others. But then how unfortunate that they can't see that in themselves, right? And so on that basis, have compassion for the person. And also, I mean, if you can, without, I mean, you don't want to be preachy or pushy, but probably the best way to help others is just to be a very kind, gentle, considerate role model, right?
Okay.
And so oftentimes people can see that there's something different in you, and then from their own side, if they ask and they're interested, then it's an opening to explain to them what's helping you. But if from their own side they're not interested, then usually it's not helpful actually just to point out that, oh, I'm seeing clearly this toxic pattern you have now. Like, that's not usually helpful, right, for them.
Yeah.
So, but I think really, yeah, you do have to be compassionate. But being compassionate also means, I mean, another part of, and I have to be careful how I say this, but like another part of developing a meditation practice and a spiritual practice is, like, we all need supportive friends. It's like any sport that we're doing, If you want to get much better at, like, I don't know, lacrosse or something, then it helps to spend time with other people who are good at lacrosse, right? It doesn't help that much to spend time with people who are basketball players, because they're doing something different, right? So with meditation, like, it helps to develop friendships with other people who have similar interests, right? And then with other people who, maybe from earlier, in your life, that they're just totally not interested. It's not that you don't care about them anymore, but especially if they're involved in a lot of, like, toxic conversation and behavior that you feel like is not a good influence on you, yeah, then you take a bit of distance, right? That's just pragmatic. And it doesn't mean we don't care about them or don't want the best for them, but I kind of think, as new spiritual practitioners or new meditators, we're kind of like a sprout, like a young plant, where the environment has a big effect on us. And if you're in a environment with a lot of that causes, that's not supportive, it can easily, you die, right, in the practice. But but the objective is you become kind of strong and stable enough in your practice that it doesn't matter who you're around. And then you can, as you get more mature in your practice, you can be a more positive influence on people, even though, they're not particularly supportive of your practice at all, right? That's the long-term objective. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so I'm assuming you all feel comfortable. What? There is? Oh, Teresa. Okay.
Sorry, I'll just say quickly that, I mean, you talked about it, and I think it's important to hear from other people that consistency, that daily meditation and long retreats of meditating really proved to me that exploring my own mind was the way out of my own suffering. It took quite a while for me to really get that. But I think, and what you were just talking about, being surrounded by people, going to retreats, going to teachings, things like that, with other people, not just watching on YouTube, not just reading books, but actually interacting with other people, I have found very, very helpful for my own practice, and also just to keep a beginner's mind, I don't know everything. There's always more for me to learn.
Mhm.
Okay, blah, blah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Teresa. Yeah. Yeah, in addition, I mean, kind of to maybe repeat what Teresa was saying, because she has a lot of experience doing like longer term retreats, months, many months on end. Is yeah. And the one end, it's important to do kind of regular practice, daily practice. Even, there's a huge difference even just between meditating like 5 minutes one day and not at all. Because each time you meditate, it's like it's a certain kind of experience that we have. It's a certain like space in our life that we come to, this space of where I sit quietly and I focus within, and I kind of everything else outside, I'm kind of letting go for the time and I'm focusing and trying to understand and shape in a more positive way what's going on with my mind. So every time we do that, whether it's, just 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour. I mean, ideally, like, half hour, an hour every day, something. But even on days or weeks where we're so busy, we just don't have time, just to sit down and kind of come in touch with that space, even for 5 minutes, is a huge difference, is way better than just not kind of going into that space at all for many days on end. And then, yeah, as Teresa alluded to, but also from time to time doing a meditation retreat where you spend all day for a weekend or a week or a month just doing meditation, then you really get a taste. I mean, you really see things change quickly, and especially if you combine it with, studying and then thinking about what you're reading or explanations that you've heard, and then combine that with meditation, then you get a much stronger taste of kind of the wisdom of, in this case, the Buddhist tradition, but it's the same with any spiritual tradition, like that you get a much richer taste of that. And that's what you see. I mean, people serious about spiritual practice in any tradition in the past, that's what they've done. The Jesus spent 49 days in the desert, Muhammad as well. The Buddha spent 6 years on the river of Naranjan. Like all the major spiritual figures, they spent time in seclusion, like doing serious meditation. Of course, that might not be for most people, but even just a daily practice is something excellent. And then also, yeah, it's really, there's nothing like being making time to be with other people, like at a center like this or in a retreat. And there's a retreat center in our sister centers, one in Boulder Creek and one in SoCal, that each have regular programs to do retreat. It's very inspiring to meet other people who have similar interest and doing the same thing together, right? There's a certain energy when you meditate in a group. It's it's much different. There's definitely a supportive kind of energy that you kind of hold in the space. It's really helpful when you're on your own. Okay, so hmm, why don't we do because we just have 15 minutes or so left in this half of the session. Why don't we do a little meditation more? We'll do this meditations on the mind like the sky and mind like the ocean. Yeah. Yeah, so maybe if you need to stand up for a minute. So yeah, if you have another question, we can look at that.
You spoke about, sorry, there is spoken microphone, but bear awareness, ocean awareness, and sky awareness, and I didn't quite understand what the sky awareness should like feel in the body, or like what it is.
Yeah, that's what we're going to meditate on now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
now we'll
perfect.
meditate on that. Yeah, I didn't really explain much about it before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so get comfortable in your meditation posture again. Now's a difficult time to meditate because you just had lunch and it's hot. So don't fall asleep. So be careful not to fall asleep. So as you get comfortable in your posture, gradually gather your attention within and focus your attention on your breath or the nature of your mind. Let's say focus on the breath. Now let's all start in the same way. Focusing on our breath. Mm. So gradually let your awareness of the breath fade into the background more and turn your attention more to the mind that is aware. So your own mind that's observing the breath. Become more aware of that. So instead of looking kind of out at the object of the breath, you're looking more in at that, that mind that's observing the breath, that's aware of the breath and other sounds in the environment, other sensations in your body, other thoughts. So whatever appears to your mind, instead of primarily looking out at the objects that are appearing, the perceptions that are appearing to the mind, try to be primarily aware of the mind that is aware of those. Mhm. And then we can use this analogy of the ocean. Our mind is like an ocean, in that, like on the ocean, there's a surface of the ocean, which is disturbed by waves. There's waves moving different directions in reaction to other things that influence the ocean, the wind, um, and then ships and currents that are moving the surface of the ocean in different ways and causing the waves to arise. But each of those waves, they've arisen from, they're on the surface of the water. So there's this huge body of water down below the waves. And then those waves arise, from the water and sink back into the water in a way. When the wind, when the wind pushes, the waves arise and then the waves pass away. Whereas the deep stillness of the water remains the same. So in that way, try to, in the present moment, just continue to observe whatever perceptions arise. Can remain aware of the breath, the breathing, and then also hear the sounds in the environment, and then observe as different thoughts arise and pass away. Let's see how all these perceptions are like waves on the surface of our mind. And there's this, from moment to moment, there's this continued existence of our own mind that's clear and knowing. Right? It's clear in one way, it's clear in that anything can appear to it. There's no perception fixed in the face of a mind, just like there's no reflection fixed in the space of a mirror. And from moment to moment, our mind is continually aware of itself, aware of other objects. So then we try to, at the same time, see these different perceptions like waves arising and passing away on the surface of the ocean. And then remain aware of, the nature of the mind itself, which is steady and consistent, kind of deep and vast, and makes possible all those waves on the surface. Mm. And then our mind is like the sky. So again, in that, the mind, that which is clear and knowing. Well, we might begin with a couple questions like what's the color of our mind? Or where's the center and where's the periphery of our mind? How far does our mind expand? How much is it possible? How many things can our mind be aware of? What's the limit of our ability to be aware of and know things? Mm. Yeah, so our mind doesn't have any color, doesn't have any shape or size, and it's difficult to find any limit for our ability to be aware of and know things. So in a way, like we can think our mind is like the sky or like a space. It's this vast space of awareness in which anything can appear. Mm. Any thought can arise and pass away. Emotions arise and pass away. Memories, arise and pass away, just like clouds passing through the sky. Like clouds, appear and they change shape and then they disappear. They just fade into the environment or, fade into the atmosphere or the wind blows them on. But they're never in the nature of the mind. They're never, or the clouds are never in the nature of the sky. They're just things that independence upon certain causes and conditions, they temporarily arise and pass away. So like that, we can recognize how different thoughts and emotions, memories, plans for things in the future, different perceptions of sight and sound and smell, taste and touch, they arise in the space of our mind and pass away. And usually we get caught up with those things that are temporarily arising and focus in exclusively on those and lose sight of the kind of vast clarity and this kind of spaciousness of our mind. So here what we want to do is try to do the opposite. Remain aware of this vast, spacious kind of clarity of our mind, the luminosity of the mind. It illuminates objects, makes them known. And then just let, whatever appearances arise and pass away. And try to remain primarily with and identify with this kind of vast, spacious quality of our mind. So gradually relax your attention. Mm. So we can briefly dedicate that, yeah, by virtue of this meditation and all we've done in this first part of the session. This session, may all beings be more aware of the nature of their own minds and gain more control over their own minds and use them in a more positive way. Why don't we stop now for a 10-minute break? Yeah, I'm thinking what to talk about next. I think I'll talk about, there's actually not part of the curriculum, but there's a lot of, oops, I need sharing. I need, yeah. There's a lot of, it's not really part of traditional Buddhist teaching, but there's been a lot of research on meditation in the last 30 years or so, 20, 30 years. So there's a lot of interesting research on the benefits of meditation by like neuroscientists, psychologists, mainly. So it's quite, I don't know, I find it quite, kind of can be inspiring and generate enthusiasm, kind of to look at that research if you're inclined, because it's a completely different way of looking at, investigating what meditation is. So let's see, and it's also, it's in the popular media a lot lately. So there's, many benefits are found. And it's interesting to think about, different angles on the benefits of meditation. So here's a graphic. Can you see well enough? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so 10 reasons why daily meditation is so beneficial. I'll just look at the graphic and then show you some examples of some of the research. So we start here. Meditation is linked with feeling less stressed, as well as actually lowering the stress hormone cortisol. Right. So, the thing that's unique, like feeling less stressed, like we don't need scientists to show us that, right? That's been known since ancient times. But then, the modern development is, well, to link stress with what's a physiological characteristic besides just our, what we can perceive as levels of, certain hormone, cortisol in this case. And so it provides a bit more concrete evidence that actually it's not just, because one might think, well, maybe actually we're just distressed, but we just feel less stressed or something. I don't know. But actually, that meditation actually lowers the kind of chemical markers of stress in our bodies. Those actually are reduced by meditation. And then, you can see in your own experience when you're stressed, it's excellent. Meditation is really helpful just to watch your breath. Because usually we're stressed because we usually have a kind of thought pattern that goes with it. We think of whatever thing is worrying us. We think of that again and again and again, and that makes us stressed, right? So just to let go of that and focus on your breath can help. And then you create some kind of space in your mind where you're, one step removed from that thinking that's causing you to feel stressed, right? You can kind of let that be a bit more in the distance, some space in the mind, and then think about that whole issue in a more constructive way where you actually address the cause of the concern rather than just worrying about it. And then in studies, students who were trained in mindfulness meditation achieved better grades. So for us, it's probably not relevant so much, but it can help with think about things better and have better emotional regulation. Meditation can result in brain changes that protect against mental health conditions, right? So, there's a whole issue of neuroplasticity that you might have heard of, where, in the past the idea was that our brains develop from the time we're infants and through childhood, our brains develop. They increase the number of synapses and the neural pathways are developing and growing until we're in about our mid-20s, and then from then onwards, the theory was that they just decline, right? And our memory becomes worse, our cognitive ability becomes worse. But now that's been discredited, and actually there's the idea of neuroplasticity, that our minds continue replacing cells and changing and growing throughout our life, even into what do you say, elderly, even in the 70s and 80s, as we continue. And that's one of the best preventative measures we can take against becoming senile and dementia. Yeah, dementia, exactly, is remaining mentally active, right, in your later years. And meditation can be a big part of that, right? Meditation is a different kind of mental activity we can engage in, and that can protect against, well, here, mental health conditions, like it could be dementia on one hand, also depression, loneliness. One of the biggest and one of the strongest predictive factors for depression is mental rumination, just not being focused on whatever you're doing, thinking about all different things. And I mean, it's a strong predictor of unhappiness in general, depression being an extreme form of that. So just generally having more mental focus, being more focused in whatever we're doing, brings more happiness and satisfaction. Also, when we meditate, because we become more sensitive and kind of compassionate towards ourselves, then we become more compassionate and kind and sensitive, aware of others, and then that promotes better social bonding with others, which is a big preventative against loneliness and other forms of mental ill health, right? Then meditation helps us to process emotions, even when not actively meditating, right? So this is one thing we'll talk about more either today or tomorrow, is how to use the space of meditation to work with different emotions. I mean, I already talked about a little bit about it, but to process different, especially disturbing emotions. So we want to, again, reduce disturbing emotions and increase positive emotions through meditation, through different meditation practices. So yeah, meditation helps us to do that. And one big thing, so this is one big finding through meta-analysis. There's an excellent book, if you're interested in this kind of research, probably the best book to start with is called Altered Traits by Richard Davidson and Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman is the famous author of Emotional Intelligence, which came out like 30 years ago. It was very influential in the whole field, in many fields, business and especially psychology and mental health. But the emotional intelligence, the premise is that, whereas the IQ, intelligence quotient. Yeah, there's emotional EQ, yeah, in addition. That basically just like the things that the mental abilities that the IQ scores, which are more like critical thinking abilities, are not like a good predictor of success in life, in short. You can be really intelligent, but if you're not emotionally like aware of others and you don't know how to communicate with others well, then you can't work together well with others, and then it's difficult to have success in whatever you're doing, right? So being able to work well with others requires a degree of emotional intelligence, which leads to empathy, and then it leads to good communication with others. So he's one of the co-authors of this book, Altered Traits. But the title, as the title implies, I mean, it's a look at kind of all the research that's been done on meditation in the last like 25 years. It was published about 5 years ago, Altered Traits. In a very user-friendly way, it's presented. And Daniel Goleman's very good at that. He has a science background, but he was a journalist for a long time. But what the kind of one of the key takeaways from this, looking at research on the effects of meditation over the last 20, 30 years, is that yes, while we're meditating, of course, it improves our state of mind in different ways. Our mental focus, we have less extreme reaction to things, tend to be more empathetic and so forth. But that effect of practicing meditation carries over to even times when we're not meditating, which is what it's talking about here. Meditation helps us to process emotions even when not actively meditating. So the whole purpose of meditation session is to kind of prepare you for the ordinary experiences you face in life when you're not meditating. And so some research shows that, you know, like learning to process emotions, it becomes a habit that you have even when you're not meditating, the kind of skill. And then meditation helps the elderly feel less lonely and reduces genes linked to inflammation, right? So yeah, that's one interesting thing about like doing mindfulness meditation or compassion meditation. Those are the two that have been primarily studied so far. It's just simple mindfulness, like watching the breath, or generating compassion, meditation on compassion. Meditation on compassion tends to be like we can see a very quick transformation in ourselves when we meditate on compassion, because we're biologically kind of pre-wired to have compassion, because it's part of our evolutionary development for survival, right? Because we're mammals, right? So mammal infants require the care of their parents, especially their mother, to survive, right? So as mammals, then we're kind of pre-programmed to have compassion for, at least for our own young, but then that can be easily extended to others, right? So you can see when you meditate on compassion, it's very easy to increase the degree and the kind of scope of your compassion quite quickly. And in general meditation, whether it's mindfulness or compassion, yeah, there's interesting look at studies that study like inflammation, and also immune response. Maybe that's coming. Well, let's go through. But you can see these physiological, like if we're stressed, the more stressed we are, the more we're prone to have inflammation. But the more calm we are, have less inflammation. And inflammation is related to a lot of other physical ill health. Meditation is linked with decreased cigarette, alcohol, and drug abuse. Yeah, probably. I mean, probably. I don't know. I don't know. Why do you think that might be? Any guesses? Why would meditation be linked with decreased use of cigarettes, alcohol, and drug abuse? Any guesses?
I could speak from personal experience. When you find a solution to your problems, that you don't need to drink or smoke or use other drugs, because meditation, for me anyway, is a solution to those problems, then I don't crave the other things to fix them.
Yeah, exactly. I think usually why do we smoke or drink or use drugs is because there's something disturbing our minds and we want some relief from that or distraction from that. And so when you find something else to relieve, problems in the mind, then you don't need those things anymore. Any other ideas? Okay. Bay? Oh, you look like the way you were holding the mic, I thought maybe you were about to say something. Okay. Yeah, Teresa hit the nail on the head, I think. Okay, we experience less anxiety as meditation loosens connections in particular neural pathways. Yeah, so the neural pathways, I don't know, but also, because I mentioned neuroplasticity, of course, in the Buddhist worldview, and maybe this is a good point, it's a good time to make this point, because I didn't speak about, is that the mind, whereas in mainstream science, the mind is usually considered what the brain does. It's a process of the brain. It's a byproduct. Like our perception of our consciousness and mind is just kind of an illusory byproduct of brain activity, right? So brain is fundamental, and then the mind is just kind of part of the process of the brain in mainstream science. Of course, the Buddhist view is completely opposite. And the Buddhist view, mind is primary. And the mind is something completely, it's not physical, and it's not entirely based on physical activity of the brain. So while there's strong correlation between, definitely there's a relationship between what happens in our brain and what happens in our mental experience, not every level of mental experience is dependent upon brain activity, and we can have subtle levels of mental experience that are totally independent of the brain. And therefore there can be past and future lives, right? Because rebirth depends upon there being a stream of consciousness that goes from one life through death to another life. So why was I talking about that here? Oh, yeah. And neuroplasticity. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So in the view of Buddhism and some neuroscientists, a minority, then actually, and it kind of agrees more with common sense, is that not only, of course, when there's changes to the brain, there's changes to our mental activity. Like if we get part of the brain is damaged, we lose memories and lose certain, cognitive ability, which is dementia is, result of that is kind of like that. But also, just like when we learn new things, when we direct our attention in different ways, we learn to direct our attention, then that different use of our mind would have a downward causation on the brain, right? So learning to like this bare awareness meditation where we just begin with watching our breath and then let the breath fade into the background and just are aware of different thoughts and emotions arising and letting them pass away and generate this kind of more objective and neutral way of experiencing those and relating to those. That kind of has an effect on the brain in that it loosens neural pathways and we have less anxiety. So previous thoughts that might, when they arise, they give us a lot of anxiety, if we can have a little bit more distance on those and look at those in a more objective way, cause less anxiety, and that has effect on the brain. Meditation is linked to more creativity and new ideas. As you can see, the mind becomes kind of more open and you make more abstract relationships between different things. And rapid memory recall improves with daily meditation, right? So when you do daily meditation, you can have better recall. And then some even claim that by meditating daily, you can reverse the aging process. That I'm not sure. Maybe slow. Reverse is a bit extreme. We're still aging continually. And then just to give you an example, we won't spend much time on this, but some of the studies, like this is some years ago, I went through online, you can find the different abstracts from different studies, and you get a kind of idea how these studies are done. And then you could look at the different, I listed all the different benefits different studies show. One is it boosts positive emotions, increases empathy, and increases compassion. And so, for example, this study was on loving kindness meditation. It doesn't give the sample size here, but let's see. The authors tested this build hypothesis field experiment working with adults. 39 adults, 139 adults, half of whom were randomly assigned to begin a practice of loving kindness meditation. So I guess the other half, I don't know. Results showed that this meditation practice produced increases over time in daily experiences of positive emotions. So this is from practicing loving kindness meditation, which in turn produced increase in a wide range of personal resources like increased mindfulness, a sense of purpose in life, social support, and decreased illness symptoms. In turn, these increments in personal resources predicted increase in life satisfaction and reduced depressive symptoms. And then, there's an 8-week training program in mindfulness. This 8-week training, I don't know why, but it's very common, maybe just because it's 2 months. But whether it's mindfulness or compassion, there's a lot of 8-week training programs. But that's a relatively short period of time. No, that's not long, 8 weeks. You do consistent mindfulness meditation or compassion meditation for 8 weeks. Here, let's see, 25 subjects were tested in the meditation group. So there must have been, then there was a waitlist control of 16. So that's like the neutral group was tested at the same points in time as the meditators. At the end of the 8-week period, subjects in both groups were vaccinated with influenza vaccine. So this is another kind of, what's their response to illness stimulant, something that would cause kind of symptoms of illness. Results were, we report for the first time, significant increase in left-sided anterior activism, so that's part of the brain, a pattern previously associated with positive affect, so positive emotions in the mind, in meditators compared with non-meditators. We also found significant increase in antibody titers. So that's the reaction to the vaccine. Antibodies. Your body produces antibodies in response to the vaccine, right? So increases in antibody titers to influenza vaccine among subjects in the meditation compared with those in the wait list. So that's quite interesting, right? It indicates your meditation improves the strength of your immune system. So your immune system's response to a stimulant like a sickness is stronger than in, but I mean, it follows common sense. Like when you feel good, when you feel happy, you feel less susceptible to sickness. If you're already kind of tired and not very happy, and then you're around someone sick, you feel you're more susceptible to catch that, right? You can see that in your own experience. Yeah. For those online, there was in the audience here, someone saying, Rochelle saying, does meditation maybe make you more aware of you're getting sick, and then you slow down and take better care of yourself, right? Yeah, it could also be that. That's a good question. Yeah, definitely. These kind of studies you have to think about from those different angles. Like, what is it really saying? But anyway, I won't go on. There's a lot of studies like that. That's just a sample. But like I said, if you're interested in that, then a good resource and kind of overview of many of the studies is Altered Traits by Daniel Goleman and Richard Davidson. Yeah. So why don't we do a meditation? Well, I'll explain a bit now, because one of the key things we want to use meditation for is to deal with like difficult life experiences that we have. Difficult people we have to deal with, or difficult emotions that arise a lot for us. So maybe we just generally talk through like how to use meditation to deal with those difficult experiences, and then try that out. And then try that out before the end of the session. So, yeah. Well, I guess there's three in Buddhism. There's a description of when we talk about afflictive emotions, right? Or disturbing emotions that when they arise in the mind, they disturb the peace of our continuum, right? There's three root afflictive emotions: anger, attachment, and then we can say, for the time being, selfishness, selfish concern or self-centeredness. Whereas selfish concern, self-centeredness is the root cause of attachment and anger. So, why do we call disturbing emotions? Any disturbing emotion, when it arises and it comes manifest in the mind, it disturbs the peace of the mind. So it's very easy to see this with anger, for example. When we're angry at someone, then, in that moment, we can't feel happy, right? We feel unhappy, usually because, we feel hurt or offended, maybe defensive, or outraged. Anger, quite obviously, it disturbs the mind, makes us, say things maybe that are hurtful to others, or generally part of anger is having the intention to harm another, to retaliate or respond with harming to them. And also it has a physiological effect, right? When we become angry, our heart races, so we don't feel comfortable, then blood rushes, to the face or to the muscles. There's this kind of fight or flight response. And we can even shake. And then also it has a real we can't, things, if we're eating, we can't eat. We can't enjoy things we normally would enjoy, like eating, being with those we like, being in a place we like. The mind gets very disturbed by this anger. Also, we can't sleep well. And there's studies that also show that, not from a Buddhist perspective, just from a medical perspective, the detrimental effects on anger. People who, the more frequently that people become angry over years, the more prone they are to congenital heart failure, like cardiac arrest, because it has a real detrimental effect it causes high blood pressure. And then also has detrimental effect on the heart and function of the heart. And also, people become more angry. The more frequently a person becomes angry, the more intensely, then obviously it destroys your friendships, right? So it makes other people not feel comfortable around you. You also not like to be around other people. So it leads to loneliness, which then leads to unhappiness, depression. Like I said before, one of the strongest predictors of our kind of sense of satisfaction and well-being and happiness in life is the richness of social connections we have with others, even just one or a few other people. But when we're social creatures by nature, right? So when we have like fulfilling connections with others, it makes us feel happy, right? And that, like we were saying, it supports our immune system and all of our physiological kind of well-being. Yeah. So there's anger, and anger is, so why do we talk about these three root poisons, or three root afflictive emotions: anger, attachment, and then selfishness? So it's because anger on the one hand is kind of aversion. Like we see things or see someone or ourselves, we can be angry at ourselves, we can be angry at inanimate objects, we can be angry at other people. But we see something negative about whatever the object of our anger is, right? We see something negative, and then we exclusively see that. Our mind, our kind of attention becomes very narrow, so like in that moment, that's all we see about that person. If we're angry at ourselves, we see some fault in ourselves, and then that's all we see. We lose kind of the big picture of seeing everything about ourselves. And when we're angry at another person, it's the same way. We see something that we don't like about what they said or did or how they are, and then that mind, it becomes very narrow and exclusively focuses on that, and then exaggerates the negativity, exaggerates the degree to which that thing is bad, and then wants to push that away or destroy or push away or make it cease to, because we perceive that is not only it's like exaggeratedly bad, like more than it is, but that it has the power to destroy my happiness. Like my happiness is that negative thing we see, or if it's a person or inanimate object, then it's a big threat. We exaggerate the degree to which it has control over and can destroy our happiness, right? The thinking being, our happiness is something that exists within our own minds. Nobody else controls what happens with our mind, right? We need to learn to be the master of our own minds. Nobody else can make us, just as nobody else can make us happy, nobody else can also make us unhappy, right? It's within our own. Yes, other people can have an influence. So earlier, that's why I was saying it's helpful to be around people that have a positive influence on us, and to be separated from people who have a negative influence on us. But ultimately, it's in our own hands, right? So anger sees exclusively a negative about an object, exaggerates that, feels that negativity which we perceive is not a projection of our own minds, but it rather exists as a true property of the object. It exists from the side of the object. And then we want to destroy or push away or be separated from. We have aversion to that object of anger. So that's this one force, is that of seeing things in a negative light and having aversion to, right? Whereas the opposite force, attachment, is seeing things in a positive light. So attachment is like the opposite of anger. It sees just exclusively the positive aspect of the object, whether, again, we can be attached to ourselves, as with arrogant pride, or we can be attached to our bodies, or we can be attached to another person's body, or we can be attached to inanimate things like wealth and food and drugs and alcohol, and all forms of addiction is a form of attachment, right? So attachment sees the positive aspect of its object, and then exaggerates how positive, and exclusively sees that positive aspect, doesn't see anything negative about the object, and then feels like that what our perception of whatever's good and attractive in the object is from the side of the object. It's not a projection of our mind. It's from the side of the object. And then has this false expectation that the object of our attachment can please me, can make me happy. If only I can have that, then I'll be happy. So that's why we talk about anger and attachment, because there's these two. There are many other afflictive emotions, like greed or jealousy or vengeance or low self-esteem, but they're all kind of related to, or sort of some branch form of, either this fundamental aversion to things we see as bad, or attraction to things we see as good and as pleasant. And then the third being being self-centeredness or selfishness is because both attachment and anger, they arise from a fundamental kind of concern with exclusively ourselves, what we want, what I want. No, it's not like, when we're angry at another, it's not like there are kind of exceptions and we can go into that, but it's not like we're concerned about especially what's good for that person or what's good for, the world or something, what's good for others. It's mainly we want something and then someone blocks us from getting what we want and then we get angry about that. Anger generally arises from some form of attachment. If we didn't care about how things were, then there's nothing to get angry about. No, it's because we want something to be in a specific way, and then someone's not doing what we want. It's blocking our ego. Our ego is not getting what we want. Then we get angry, right? If our ego is just like, yeah, whatever, it's okay. Any this way is fine. That way is fine. I don't care. Then we don't get angry, right? So it's when we want something in a certain way. Now, a big question. This question always comes up is, well, but what about when someone's really doing something that's really unjust and wrong and needs to be stopped? Yes, that is the case. Crimes happen. People act in ways that are totally immoral and wrong. So it is fine to be like to have that view. That this is a very harmful behavior. They're treating me the wrong way. They're treating this other person the wrong way. They're doing something that's totally destructive and bad in the world, and that needs to be stopped, and I need to do something about it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And that we can say is kind of like outrage. You can be outraged about something. But outrage doesn't necessarily entail you want to harm that person or you want to harm anyone. It's rather that you want to stop a destructive behavior or destructive action from happening for the benefit of the victim and for the benefit of the criminal, right? It benefits both, right? Because one person being enabled and allowed to go on harming others is harming, of course, the victims of that harm, but it's also, in terms of karma especially, it's very bad for the person who's perpetrating the harm as well, right? It's bad all around, right? For us and for others. So there is space. So saying that we need to get rid of and eliminate anger doesn't mean we just need to have the view that whatever anybody does is okay. That's not the case. That's completely different. And we can be outraged about immoral actions, right? And take a strong stand on things. That's fine. But yeah. But so back to this, and one big, I guess you can say, maybe because going back to this, anger and attachment both arise from selfish concern. That's the point I'm trying to make. And so in terms of like outrage versus anger, you can see how you can be outraged about something and it not be a selfish thing, right? You can be it can actually be an altruistic thing where you're concerned about someone who's being harmed and you want to protect them. It's not that you're being harmed. It'd be easier for you just to walk the other way and forget about it, right? But you're really concerned about someone else. So altruistic concern can lead to outrage. But altruistic concern, if it's even, it should also be, like I was saying, as concerned about the person who's perpetrating harm as the person who's the victim of that harm, right? Whereas anger is not like that. Anger is primarily selfish concern, but selfish concern can be, concern for oneself as an individual, but it can also be concerned with the group I identify with. Like, you can get angry if you see, like, if you're a parent, I'm probably, most parents have had this, like, and you see another child harming your child, you get angry because you identify with your child. That's part of you identify, so get angry at the other child, or, friends are the same way, right? So, and also, but even like, racism, someone was asking me, not long ago about, well, is racism related to attachment and anger? And I think definitely, like, racism or any kind of bigotry, it's like you identify with your group and then identify the other group as something that's a threat to or harm to your group. And then so you justify treating them in a way that you wouldn't want to be treated, or you wouldn't want your group to be treated. So definitely, like, racism, it comes from, it's kind of attachment to your race, for example. And then you feel like your race should be entitled to this and this and this privilege. And then when you see you perceive another race of people as like blocking your God-given right to that privilege, then you get angry at that group of people and you justify like harming them, right? You see, and you can see how it totally works. You anger, see something negative, so as a racist, then you see something negative in the other race, and that's all you see. You don't see any of the positive qualities, right? You just make up this story about how this other race, and any kind of bigotry, again, it works like this. The other is bad, you exaggerate that badness, and then you have the view that that kind of negative quality is not just a projection, it's not just your opinion, your view, it's the truth, you know, from the side of that race, that's how they are. And then you want to destroy or harm that, right? So you see, it's very clear. The Buddhist description, it maps very clearly onto real life situations. But it's good to think about different situations. But it arises from this fundamental selfish concern, right? This kind of mind of racism. It's not like, yes, I'm equally concerned with the welfare of all sentient beings. Like that's not there, right? I'm concerned with me and my group that I identify with. So this is this kind of selfish concern. So, and then attachment with anger, it's quite easy to see how it's selfish. You're really concerned with what I want and not at all with the person I'm angry at. Like I couldn't care less about them or the thing I'm angry at. Attachment, it's a bit more difficult to see. Generally, attachment is a bit more subtle because it's mixed up with positive emotions, with feeling happy and pleasure and connectedness with others. But first of all, attachment here is not, in Buddhism, when we talk about attachment, we're talking about the kind of emotion I just described. It's more, you can clearly see like in jealousy or greed. It's not talking about, in Western psychology, there's this discussion of attachment, which means this emotional bonding between a parent and child. Not talking about that in Buddhism. That's something, this is a completely different use of the same word. But here, attachment is, well, you can see oftentimes the question, love versus attachment. What's the difference between loving someone versus being attached to someone? Well, here it becomes quite clear, like really genuine love for someone is wish for them to be well and happy, right? You have affectionate concern for someone, that you really care about them and you want them to be well and happy in whatever that means, whatever form that takes for them. And there's no expectation, right, for some return. There's no strings attached, right? So ideal love, pure love is like selfless love. You just care about what's good for them, irregardless of what it means like for you, right? Whereas, usually love is mixed with attachment, where yes, I see the person that I care about in a positive light, and also I want them to care about me, right? If they don't care about me, then I'm not going to care about them, or something like that. So there's some like attachment is versus love, like pure love is there's no selfish concern. We're not making any demands of that person. Whereas we're not expecting that person to do something reciprocal for us by us caring about them. Whereas attachment is like we see something positive about someone, and then we want our connection with them to satisfy us. We put this expectation that they are going to make me happy. Being connected with them, being closer to them is going to make me happy. And so we have this selfish expectation that they make me happy. And then when they do something we don't like that makes us unhappy, then we become angry, right, at them. So that's where we can see how, when love is mixed with attachment. So yeah, attachment always has this kind of selfish concern element that goes with it. And then, so both of these minds of anger and attachment, they both arise from this kind of selfish concern. So yeah, we only have about 10 minutes left, so we should be talking about the antidotes now. But why don't we just, instead of doing that, why don't we meditate for 8 minutes or so, and just. But the whole point of talking about this is because one thing we want to take away from this course is like, well, how to use meditation to work with real life problems that I have, right? So basically all of our real life mental, emotional problems are related to anger or attachment in some form, right? So we'll do a little meditation, and you just look at your own life experience and try to find an example, at least one, or maybe, two examples of just like some instance of anger or attachment that's troubling you, and then try to look at how you can, work with that experience in meditation, right? So yeah, go ahead and get prepared to meditate. Mm. So gradually get comfortable in the posture, then briefly scan through your body, and then briefly regenerate a positive motivation. And then gradually gather your awareness within and focus on your breath for just a few moments. Mm. So then whenever we meditate on disturbing emotions, it's, we never start with the most like powerful disturbing emotion you've ever had, or, any kind of very traumatic experience, because that'll easily just kind of cloud our vision in a way, and we become overwhelmed with that experience again, and then we can't kind of look at it in an objective way, or it's difficult. So usually we start with a mild form of a disturbing emotion, a mild to kind of middling form, so that, we can, as we recall it, we have a clear taste of what it was to feel that, but it also, there's space to look at that experience in a kind of a new and objective way, right? So with that said, then try to bring to mind an instance of a disturbing emotion, an instance of anger or attachment. from your past. And bring it to mind in that you remember vividly what it was like to feel that again. Maybe recall the certain situation or conversation or context in which it arose. And then kind of bring a degree to it in your experience again. Mm. So then the next step would be to go through this kind of Buddhist description of what that emotion is like. What is the object? How does the mind perceive that object? So what's the object of your example? And then how does your mind perceive the object? Is it exaggerated? Does the mind focus exclusively on a positive or negative aspect and become, narrowly focused on that and blind to the other side, other aspects of the object? And does it exaggerate that positivity or negativity? And does it perceive that attractiveness or unattractiveness as existing from the side of the object itself? Mm. Yeah, so relax your attention there. Yeah, we'll have to continue tomorrow because we're out of time. But we'll continue with this meditation tomorrow. So now we'll just briefly dedicate. Yeah, also there were probably a lot of questions related to attachment, anger. But we'll continue with all that tomorrow. So thinking whatever virtuous energy we've created today, then we can dedicate that become a cause for ourselves and all other sentient beings to be free from every form of suffering, especially physical and mental, physical sickness and mental suffering, loneliness, depression, and every form of harm. And then especially bring to mind anyone you'd like to pray for who's sick or recently passed away or experiencing some other kind of hardship. So may all those your prayers be fulfilled and accomplished in accordance with your wishes, and especially those who are suffering so much in the Middle East, and Palestine, and in Ukraine and other areas of the world, places in the world that are torn by violent conflict and famine, natural disasters. You know, both the victims and their families, those who are experiencing so much grief, having lost loved ones. May they all find relief from that grief, find a source of well-being and joy. And all those who've recently died, may they take precious human rebirth or rebirth in a pure land in whatever condition is best possible for them. And then may we ourselves and others have every form of well-being and happiness up to full enlightenment. And especially may the center, ocean of compassion center, be free of every form of obstacle and have every supportive condition in terms of volunteers and finances and everything that's required for the center to flourish. And may anyone who sees, hears, remembers, thinks, or is connected with the center in any way be free from every suffering and have every form of well-being and happiness. Okay. Thank you all, and see you tomorrow.